And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Sports. We are a day after the Springbok team announcement and a few days before the second test against Australia. And thought today we kind of just sort of have another look at the squad. We've now had kind of a day to digest what we've seen. And what's been quite interesting is I'm watching a lot of rugby podcasts and sort of pundits and kind of the reaction and sort of gauging how much we need to worry versus how much is last weekend. It's just one of those things. And that's the big thing I think we need to sort of maybe understand. There are going to be games we are going to lose. There are going to be games where we are going to not play well and we're going to win. And we need to make sure that we taper both expectations but also our responses a little bit. So coming up on the show today, we're going to be picking apart that Springbok team. We're going to be looking at some crucial battles for this weekend, bringing you a couple of interesting news, by the way, because there's been a couple of interesting announcements in the last sort of 24 hours, as well as some big potential team news for the game on Saturday. We had an open training session today, and our man on the ground has noticed something quite significant for the weekend before ahead of us in terms of a certain player not being involved. So we'll also be talking a little bit about the All Blacks in Argentina, the fact that Jason Ryan's come out and spoken about the All Blacks picking quite a settled and consistent side for this upcoming weekend. We're also going to be looking at the news coming out of the Bulls that Buddha Chamberlain's potential is leaving at the end of the season. So lots of stuff sort of going around and lots of stuff to get into. Please do smash a like on the video, by the way. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Let's start with this box side, shall we? And by the way, if you'd like to feature on our we've got a couple of new elements that we're adding to the streams, and including mostly on match day, which is kind of our big focus, obviously. Because you know what, we never rest on our laurels here at Forever Sports. So we're introducing a few new cool and fun things in alongside that, hopefully in the new platform we're launching this weekend. But if you'd like to become part of the coaching corner, inverted commas, we will be debuting all our super chats within the coaches corner, ranking our top coaches, and another way to sort of thank all the people that support the channel, as well as a very cool new concept when somebody becomes a member. So if somebody wants to become a member and test and see if it works, feel free, because we've tested our side, but it's one of those things until someone actually does it, we don't know if it's going to work, but hopefully we'll see it on Saturday when more people do tend to join the members club. But I want to put a poll out, and what I want to ask on the poll is as follows. Will the Boks score 3+ tries on Saturday? It's supposed to be wet. We only scored 3. Well, let's say 4+. So 4+4 and 4 more tries on Saturday. Because the big question I want to ask is, will we score more than what we scored last week? Because we've not necessarily chosen as attacking a team, but at the same time, why is my monitor's turning off? But at the same time, we've got a very solid side when it comes to hopefully set piece dominance potentially. Hopefully we'll have potentially more tries. Maybe we'll be trying to do that a bit more, trying to really sort of out-muscle them, which could be a very interesting way of going about it and could provide more success. I personally would be voting yes in that poll if I was to vote. I can't vote. I can only add the vote because I think that we will do it. I think we will see us respond. I think that's the main thing, is we want to see a response. And I think that we'll sort of keep it a bit tighter. And I think we'll sort of have a bit of a multi-pronged attack where we'll look to try and take on the forward battle as well as look to take on the... if it's open play, we'll look to have a go. Somebody like Grant Williams is going to want to have a go. You've got Cheslin Colby, somebody who can make something out of nothing, for example. We've got players who can create. Now, interestingly, very, very interestingly, and what we have to wait and monitor is the fact that Villaroo did not train for the Boks today. So we have a confirmation that he was in a tracksuit down in Cape Town and did not take part in the training session at all. In his place, April Fassi was running at fullback, which would indicate that should Villaroo not basically, if for whatever reason he didn't train, if he does not recover in time, we will see April Fassi in that fullback position. But it does sound like it's a bit of a race against time to get Villaroo ready for the match itself, which is not ideal, in terms of even if he does play, he's obviously not missed a training session, where he didn't get to participate. Apparently, he was manning the drones, so it could be part of the new Bok analysis squad, and you can see Valiru flying drones over the Springbok training and finding out all the extra information that we get from it. But earlier on, 9HDF2 said the only people who ever say that this is a non-Springboks fans. I enjoy every bit of Boks conversation of rugby. This conversation shouldn't even be entertained. Then saying, look what happened when we tried pleasing the rest of the world. We got embarrassed by arguably the worst Wallabies team of all time. I do not think that this is the worst Wallabies team of all time. This Wallabies team did beat the British and Irish Lions. I think that the Wallabies side back in 2023 was substantially worse than this Wallabies team that they've got at the moment. I was there when Wales took them apart. I was actually at the game itself, and Australia were awful. They really, really were awful. This is a much better Australian side. So I think that's harsh. I think that they've got genuinely world-class players. I think that Tom Wright is genuinely world-class. I think Will Skelton is world-class. I think James Slipper and Angus Bowler are world-class. I think Harry Wilson's a very, very good player. I think Fraser McWright's going to be absolute class. So I don't think that's a fair assessment. I do think that they are substantially improved. Even in the last year, I think they're a much better side. So, I mean, at the moment, to be fair, their ranking is, they're sitting at 6th, I think, at the moment. And they've obviously moved up a little bit in terms of gaining on the other side, but yeah, I mean, they ranked 6th, so it's not like it's a Wales, for example, who currently sits outside the top 10, and they're 2.6 points odd away from England. So I think that they could actually end the year in as high as 5th, to be honest, because I think that they can have a go at the likes of an England and in terms of the rankings at the end of the year. But Tristan says 4 pushover scrum tries. Yes, well, there we go. That might be exactly the thing. We've brought in very solid scrummages. We've got a big pack, so maybe it will be literally 4 pushover scrum tries. Maybe that's exactly what the plan could be. More tries, scrum tries. Going and be very solid at the line out and dominating them at set piece. So that's still, and then that's probably the whole big thing at the end of the day is a try. We're not here to please the world and play a brand of rugby that is on request. We're here to win games. And I do think that on Saturday we were maybe guilty of not switching back to what we sort of was tried and tested and kind of what we knew. But I don't think that necessarily means we need to throw out what we're capable of doing. I mean, I don't think there was ever any Boks supporter around the world during those first 20 minutes that did not like what they saw. That weren't sitting there going, well, you see, look at this is Bok rugby now. So there is the possibility of being able to do both, being able to play a very attractive brand of rugby, being able to play a brand of rugby which scores lots of tries, that, has lots of hands and very exciting. But you need to be able to, for me, I always sort of describe it as that like a bow and arrow, and you talk about strings on a bow, and you've got to add the strings to the bow, and then it's about making sure that they are all nice and tight and together and linked, for example, so that you can then fire the arrow. And I think that is probably the best analogy I want to come up with today, because it's a case of finding the balance. When do we have to play expansively, for example? Because we do, at the end of the day, being the biggest team and having that brute force is great. But if a team like an Ireland, for example, can go toe-to-toe with you, what's plan B? What else have you got in the attacking repertoire to be able to break that down? And that is the whole point of what we're doing at the moment. We're just adding this multifaceted approach where we're not just so predictable, for example, because I think that, especially in the likes of 2023, maybe even more in 2019, where we had such a short turnaround to turn a team that wasn't performing into a team to win the World Cup, we were probably far more predictable, but there were still a couple of mind games. For example, Rassie, even the whole sort of the different moves, for example, and the midfield line out and all these different sort of things that the Boks, try. A lot of that, they said, they might never actually bring that out in a high pressure game. They might never bring that out in a World Cup final, for example. However, other teams now spend time preparing for it. Other teams have to look at the midfield line and understand, well, potentially, how do we take them on? How do we stop that midfield line out? How do we stop the, for example, that whole wraparound with Grant Williams taking the gap and the different sort of attack models where we've got people on different shoulders, for example. You're like Lua Diago, one pop, long pass type of thing, getting out to the wings, your cross kicks. You've got to just try and add so many different things that it becomes difficult to predict. And then you've got to have the capacity to be able to actually bring up those things on demand. You need to be able to say, right, listen, and that's why the nice thing about having such a diverse squad. Because, for example, you can go on Saturday, and if things aren't working, then you have to say, right, listen, maybe you have to change things up again. You bring a Sasha on a 10, and you just change the way you kind of play for it, and you sort of then start bringing in a few new different elements. You can make switches like having a Kane Moody switch to an outside center versus a Jesse Creel, for example. You can put a Sash Famagama Zulu at full back and try run a lot more, to the wings and try to do a lot more counter-attacking, for example. So it's about having squads and having players and having game plans that you can kind of switch during the game to be able to adapt to what's in front of you. Because that was what we didn't do well enough last weekend, is we did not adapt to what was in front of us. Because at the end of the day, we were well ahead, we were playing very well, and then things started getting pressure, and we didn't go, you know what, maybe we just need to do a few things like this and just stop the pressure, stem the flow a little bit. And it's that ability to recognize when to continue doing what we're doing, when to maybe move away from it, and when to sort of find the balance of the different game plans and the different styles we can play. So that's the big thing for me, is we can't lose what we've developed in the last year under Tony Brown. That beat us. We beat the All Blacks twice. We lost one game last year against Argentina. Similar kind of form we did it on Saturday, where we kind of gassed ourselves out and then we let them come back in. But we can't pretend like we didn't go over there last year. Last year we didn't thrash Australia ×2, beat New Zealand at home ×2. We lost 2 games, so we lost to Ireland as well, but beat Ireland at home, then lost to Ireland. We were very good last year, and we had a pretty good winning streak before we lost over the weekend, and a lot of that was played with very good rugby that would have scored tries against the best teams, and did score tries against some of the best teams in the world. So you can't move away from that based on one result. We've got to make sure that we stick to our processes and stick to what the plan is at the end of the day. And the plan is that this is something that adds to our attack. It doesn't necessarily replace what we already have, but it adds to it. And I think, for example, Saturday is going to be an interesting example of different conditions and obviously a different sort of type of team, more pressure, different pressure, for example. How do we then respond? And then for me, it's now going in 2 weeks' time against New Zealand. If it's at Eden Park, well, what are the conditions going to dictate? Are we going to play in wet conditions? Is it going to be in dry conditions? What are the All Blacks doing this year? Where can we find chinks in their armor that we can kind of potentially exploit? And almost being able to set up teams specifically for other teams, because maybe we're going to sit there and say, well, France play very differently to Ireland, so we need to play a different type of team against a France than a type of team against an Ireland and the likes of that. So that's, I think, the big thing we're trying to achieve. And you've got to look at it long term. You've always got to look at it long term. Now, Rassie yesterday was saying that, there's never such thing as a good loss. It's never good to lose. And it is never good to lose. Let's be perfectly honest. We don't want to lose. We're not happy about the loss. But you've got to look at what the long term gain and goal is. And that is to build a side, build a squad, build a setup that can handle as many different scenarios as possible, cope with it, and be dominant in those scenarios. A setup that can adapt to any team they're going to play, adapt to any conditions they're going to play in. Because come the World Cup 2027, you need to be adaptable at the end of the day. You need to be able to recognize when things aren't going well and have to change. You have to be able to recognize if things are going well, maybe you need to keep doing what you're doing because you can really find opportunity. Again, like I said, when you're in that kind of rhythm in that first 20 minutes, we did very well to keep the pressure on. To score 22 points in 18 minutes, that would put most teams away. Should have put Australia away. What we then didn't do is adjust after that. So it wasn't the issue of the first 20 minutes. It was the issue of how we responded afterwards, where we now need to learn how to do that a lot better. I do think that's a very boring narrative, this whole boring rugby kind of thing, kick and chat. Again, ironically, I always, and if you get personally offended in this, by the way, then that's, I suppose, kind of your problem. I always gauge people's understanding of rugby and how much they watch and how much they watch tactically based on their comments on kicking. People that say, all we do is kick it, we just kick the ball away, don't watch enough of international rugby. If you look at those who win rugby matches, it's like, I think it's like 60, 65% or something, almost 70%, the team that kicks more wins. And it's not to say that if you suddenly go and bomb 40 kicks, you're going to win. But Kicking is an incredibly crucial part to any test match team. The types of kicking, for example, often vary. So, for example, France kick deep and let teams go for them, give their forwards a bit of a break in the middle of the park. We saw the whole Dupont law then kind of outlawing that. But you then got a Boks, for example, who kick to compete. They put it up in the air. They've got runners going. Evan Etzebeth there. Chesson Colby's there. Curtly Orange is there. And the reason that we do that is also multifaceted. Again, we don't just kick to try and regain possession. What you do is when you kick it up, when you box kick, let's do a bit of a masterclass. Stevie P masterclass, as if I've got any sort of history and credentials about this. What the purpose and what the Boks do when they box kick is two things. First of all, it's contestable. So you've got an Evan Etzebeth who often leads the line, and I mean, not too many people are getting ahead of Evan Etzebeth. Or else, if it's slightly further, then you've got a wing who's running onto it. In a Curtly Orange, Chesson Colby. This weekend, you've got a Kane and Moody. There are lots of different results of that box kick. Number one, they take it, we lose possession, and we've gained 10, 15, 20 meters. Okay, so there's a territorial gain there. Now, that's in theory our worst case scenario, really. From our perspective, you've lost a bit of territory, you've lost possession, but you've gained a bit of territory. Okay, cool. Now we're back on the defense, which, by the way, we don't mind being on the defense because we can cause mistakes and then we're in a good position on the field. Option two, the next worst option is we knock it on. Okay, so Evan goes up, he knocks it on, or Chesson goes up, he knocks it on, and they call the scrum. Not in the case of they just get possession, they call the scrum. Not a bad option for us. Not a bad result because we back our scrum. So you, for example, playing against Italy, you put the ball up in the air, you knock it forward, and we're going, well, we'll scrum you. Go back to that moment where it was Curtly Orange knocked it on, or was it Damien knocked it on during the World Cup, and England were all celebrating, and there's the whole iconic moment in Chasing the Sun where Bongi says, "Yeah, you're celebrating because you scrum, but you got to scrum against us." And we won the penalty. So again, we knock it on and they award the scrum. We're not panicking because now we're saying, cool, we've got a scrum. We can have a go at them in the scrum. We don't mind that at all. Then, for example, they knock it on and we call a scrum. Even better, we've now got our own scrum, which means penalty is almost always in the cards for the Boks when we've got our own scrum. And we can potentially have a really big go at them, push them over and win a penalty advantage. We can have a go, free roll the dice, and if not, we got a penalty kick to the corner. Or option four, we then retain, and all of a sudden what's happened is that they've had to retreat, and you don't know where you're retreating to as a player. You're retreating to kind of get back on side, obviously, but you don't know if you're suddenly going to have to be switching to a defense and having to look up and seeing where the opposition is and move into a defensive structure, or whether you now need to go and add support as to win the breakdown, or to add options as a ball carrier. So it creates broken play. That's what box kicking does. It creates broken play. And if you then take it and you can use it quickly, then all of a sudden you've got a team that's moving backwards, not set up, but you can then attack. So the act of box kicking might not be the most entertaining thing in the world, but it's about what results does it generate? What situations does it create? And what opportunities does it create? And that's the big thing. So it might sort of be, oh, why are we kicking the ball away on the 10-meter line? Because if they knock it on the 22, we've got 22-meter scrum. If we win possession, we've now progressed 10, 15 meters, and we're right on the doorstep. It's about the result. You've got to be more results driven with what we're doing. So same thing, for example, when you see a bit of sort of kick chase, for example, kick tennis, and you kick deep to them and they kick to touch. What are you gaining? What is the result? What was the purpose? So for example, they don't find a great touch finder. You've now won yourself a line out in their half. So when you look at the box kick, you've got to look at what is the result going to be and what do we gain from it and what are the opportunities it creates. That is the whole thing when it comes to the box kicking. So on Saturday, we are going to box kick more. It's wet. It's going to be wet. At this stage, it's going to be wet. I mean, look, I haven't checked the weather. I've been checking the weather every day. I actually haven't checked it today. But it's one of those things that we've got to get over it because you've got to understand the purpose and why it happens. And it's going to be a case of understanding the conditions on the day. And I'm just going to check your Cape Town weather and see exactly what we're looking at. because it has been threatening to rain. So now, for example, it's looking a bit better. And it's looking like rain potentially tomorrow, but Friday is looking a bit better. And from a rain perspective, Saturday, there's still a reasonable chance, to be honest. It's still saying 35%, and I mean, it was lower than that, and it did rain. So, again, all of a sudden, weather conditions changing might change that, but I still think that we're going to have to bomb it up. We're going to want to take them on, force those errors, play off those errors. Going to some of the comments, though. So Eric says, if we lose by scoring many tries equals boring. If we win by 12-11, it'll be most exciting. Contender says, if Villiers down, start Hooker at 13, put Jesse Creel at 15, even though he's at 13. He used to play 15 back in the day. Otherwise, we start Sash or we put Hooker on the wing, Colby to 15. That's quite simple, actually. I think if Villiers down, we just put Fassi at full back. But Contender, never stop with the big selections. Never change. Contender's been here for years, and the man just wants to tinker. He's the Tinker Tailor Soldier spot. He just wants to tinker and put Jesse back at 15, try buggers at different places, and I'm all for it. Kirk P says, Rassie won't go back to 10-man rugby. Boks just need to find the balance, which they struggled with last week. Wallabies did not beat us. We beat ourselves. Poor decision-making cost us. Look, there was an element of the Wallabies playing very well. I think we have to acknowledge that. But I do think there were at least 2 or 3 tries which were on our mistakes. I look back at that Suali'i try and Mindy Boks being absolutely slaughtered for it. And I think it's a phenomenal read, to be honest. And this is not just to try and defend Money but I think it is a phenomenal read. I think the pass was on. You look to the right-hand side and you see, I think it was Peter Steph the Toy and Edwin van der Merwe on the right-hand side, free. Had that pass gone to hand, it was 2-on-1. Edwin van der Merwe goes over in the corner, very likely. Game's done. Game's absolutely done. Instead, Suali'i makes a bold call. And he goes to intercept. And he didn't take it like this. He took it brilliantly. He read it brilliantly. We're talking about a player who's going to be one of the biggest, best players in the world, I think. Suali'i, with the short thing I've watched him, he's a really good player. He makes the read, intercept try, all of a sudden, 14-point swing. Really. And that's the thing, you know. If he misses that, Suali'i, we score. And then he looks really stupid. And that's always the big thing when it comes of, trying to make those decisions and make those half a second decisions, split second decisions where you decide to go up and go for the intercept. You look at the Andre Estes and break down that left-hand side. Ball goes back inside. Nobody doesn't get a hand. Tom Wright runs the length of the field. Again, we're talking about a 10 to 14 point swing. You know, so we hold on to that ball. That pass goes to hand. We potentially we might go up to 36 points, and they could stay down at 10. You know, that's how, or 15 or 16 or whatever it was. That's how much these sort of games can swing, and that's how little there is when it comes to test match rugby, is that those small moments can change like that, flip of a coin, bounce of a ball. So we mustn't get too bogged down with it, because yes, there were mistakes. Yes, we kind of imploded. Yes, we looked tired. But I think momentum is the big thing we lost on Saturday, because momentum is a massive thing. To have momentum and to try and get it back is difficult. It really is difficult. Roberto Vilco says they will score tries from counter-attack. Ovado says Fassi will be keen to redeem himself. I have no clue. Said they lacked the game management to know when it's on and when it's not. Jean said, Stevie, I'd rather watch Ice Cube's New War of the Worlds movie than rewatch last week's game. If you know, you know. I was actually going to watch that because I enjoy watching Ice Cube, and then I get told that I think it was rated like less than 1 on Rotten Tomatoes. So I think I might be giving that one a bit of a skip. Romeo Brink says, I hope they win this Saturday. Johnny Pillay says, the good thing about our way of playing, we innovate, we evolve. As long as we do that, there will always be a force, 100%. Ethan says, Howard says, big rain in Cape Town this Saturday. We'll wait and see. The weather's now giving me a bit of anxiety as to whether it is going to change. Ethan, so are you going to stream the first New Zealand game? Which one? You mean on Saturday evening? We'll do the both rugby championship games, 100%. Dylan says, Joe is 6.5. Ethan said, to be honest, I think the Springboks got this one in the bag. Yeah, I think we'll be okay on Saturday. Look, I did say last week we were going to beat them convincingly, but to be fair, it's not like that was a bad shout. Well, not a bad shout. It wasn't like it was an unpopular shout, and it wasn't like it was a unique shout. Everybody was calling a big Bok win, you know. So yeah, I don't think I was that off the mark by joining a lot of big pundits, and I'm including like your Skalkbergs and the whole likes, and thinking that we were set to to put a big score on them. Potato says, if you remember last year, we saw Colby chucking into the lineup. If Mars doesn't do his darts but compensates in other spaces, we have from start and slow at block level, another hybrid player. Yeah, but I think Mars van der Merwe is a very good lineup option, to be honest. I think he's such a hard worker that things like that is just tight parts of the game. He works extremely hard. And I think he'll be okay tonight, to be honest. I think that... I think he's going to have a big game. As I mentioned yesterday, he's probably who I am most excited to watch this weekend, is Miles van der Merwe. Such an exciting player, good jackler, very, very hungry, had such a good season, playing with a lot of confidence. And I think if he gets going, he becomes a massive, massive option for the Boks. So, yeah, let's wait and see how he goes on the weekend. I'm excited for him. I think that other selections I'm excited for. I'm keen to see Bowen Fed continuously going. I think that... we need a big game. Franklin Moss at 7. I think Jean-Luc Dupré has got a big opportunity to prove himself. I think Thomas Toy at tight head's got a big opportunity to prove himself. Always excited to see what Sasha brings to the table. If we can start to translate some of that URC form into the Boks and understanding a bit more how sort of test match rugby works with regards to when it's on and when it's not. And Adrian there saying Franco needs to prove to Rassie why he should play and not Kubas Visa. I think it was a 50-50 between Kubas or Franco. Hubbard says John Smith gave Boks a 5-point margin to win before first Oz game. And Vade says Oz ran a lot of ball out of their 22 last week to retain possession. Hopefully we have the legs to defend this week. Ethan says, but I think last week the Springboks are training a bit too hard. That's why they look so tight in the field. And Spree says Oz will run rings around South Africa. Yeah, I don't really back that. I mean, they might. But I'll be surprised. I think this is a very, very good Boks side. You look at that back line, and it's all World Cup winners. In fact, it's just Kane, who's not a double World Cup. And yeah, Kane and Grant, who aren't double World Cup winners. You look at the 1 to 8, for example. The only non-World Cup winners there are Ruan Nakia and Jean-Luc Dupré. So you've got 13 World Cup winners in that squad. You've got probably about 9 or 10 double World Cup winners. You've got plenty of experience on the bench. And you've got some big players who are in good form. Ruan Nakia is in the form of his life at the moment. And I think he's going to have another good game this weekend. You know, I think somebody coming off the bench like a Lourdes Diago, he's starting to get back to full fitness. I mean, I thought that Lourdes looked gassed last week, but looked really good for the first 20 minutes. You know, some people saying stocks have dropped. I kind of disagree, because I think that we all looked a bit kind of sluggish. But in those first 20 minutes, I thought Lourdes, I mean, the soft touches he had. Everybody keeps going about the lineouts, and the lineouts are an issue. There's no doubt about that. He's a very good lineout operator. I do think Saturday was more a bit of an anomaly. And I think Malcolm Marks wasn't getting it particularly right either. So that's obviously something we've got to try and fix. But I thought in the Lourdes was pulling strings in that first 20 minutes. And it is about finding that balance between the conditioning side of things. Because even you look at the Barbarians, for example, the last thing you could have accused Lourdes of is not being conditioned. He was getting involved. He was finding himself on the wing. He was doing a lot of hard work with Lourdes Diago. So I think that he will add a lot off the bench, and I think that he'll add impact off the bench. I think so will Eben, for example, coming off the bench, and Volker Low coming off the bench. I think Kwagga, for example, I think he was good over the weekend, and in terms of sort of upping the ante, got a couple of his breakdowns wrong. That'll be a big work on for him this weekend. But I think that there are players in the second half who can really come on and change the game. I think the fact we can have two genuine out-and-out fetchers in Marnus van der Merwe and Kwagga Smith in the second half really excites me. I think that, you know, hopefully in the dying stage of the game, we'll be turning over a lot of ball. We'll potentially be able to take on them on the counter-attack. So that becomes quite exciting. Spree says, don't worry me, just share up in the chat. In Soviet Russia is really loving the All Blacks line at the moment. Contender said, if Jean-Luc played better than Franco, we will see Smith go to 8 and Jean-Luc to 7. I'm not sure with the Sasha shout at 15. Good on the tap, but what about his defense? Is he able to be the last man? He's a brilliant defender, Sasha. I would 100% back him there. I think David Willemse is probably still our best defensive fullback, but Sasha's a fantastic defender. I think it's a good shot in that All Blacks line, by the way. The All Blacks are looking organised. They are looking organised. And I think Jason Ryan speaking about the fact that they're looking to go to consistency. They're not looking to change too much this coming weekend is a good thing for them. I think that sometimes last year they were tinkering a bit too much and maybe not finding enough momentum, which maybe you could accuse the Boks of, but the difference is the Boks and the coaching staff have been together for a while. And I think that you've got more space and I'll be able to experiment. Where I think Scott Robertson coming in, last year I think he had a few of his favourites, but I think this year starting to understand a bit more where his side is, what he likes, what he wants. I think the big call is obviously your number 10s. I think he still needs to sort out his centres, for example, and who's kind of going to be where in the centres. But I think they are looking much more settled as a side in the Argentina game. That they weren't particularly impressive against France, but I think that was a bit of a slow start. They kind of got better as the series went by. I think that's going to be a great game in a few weeks' time, to be honest. I think if we really pitch up, I've got no doubt that we can beat them. Whether we will come down to the way we pitch up on the day. Dinner says, do you think, assuming Kanan can be a future captain? I'll be surprised, not so much from an individual point of view, although to be said that I think even from an individual point of view, he's very quiet. I think he's very much he does his own thing out on the wing. I don't think he's someone who likes the attention, likes to get involved. And from position-wide, he sits on the wing, or at outside centre. I mean, Jesse Creel's only been given a chance to captain the Boks after almost 100 games with him. We genuinely prefer captains who are closer to the action, your scrum halves, your eighth man, loose forwards, basically people in the pack. So, yeah, I don't see Kanan potentially as definitely not probably as a full-time captain. Will he maybe captain the Boks one day? Maybe. Again, assuming you're talking about Kanan Mooney. Ethan says, what does performance was similar to the second half of the first Italy game? Adrian says, Marnus reminds him of Aka van der Merwe, brings a lot of energy to the field. Spree says that Suali'i boy is legit, watched his NRL highlights, and he can leap to the stars. Yeah, I mean, you can just see the athleticism he brings. Very, very good player. And I think that as soon as he starts, I mean, he just had his first full rugby season, to be honest. And give him another season, I think he'll be an absolute superstar. I mean, they've pinned it all on him, really. He is the big face of Australia rugby at the moment. And fair enough. He made a big move and left NRL to come to rugby, where we saw like the likes of Mark Nwanga make the opposite move. I mean, imagine you had him, for example. There's some big players that Australia have lost out to NRL. I mean, they could be probably the best rugby team in the world if NRL just ceased to exist tomorrow and all those players came across. But that is the continued issue that they have to try and deal with. And then just wrapping up, people, if you are a Bulls fan, then it's some interesting news. Boeta Chamberlain has officially confirmed that he will leave at the end of the season, and he will be moving to England. This came out literally just before I went live, and I'm trying to see where he's actually going to be going. He's going to be to Newcastle, which is very interesting because Newcastle have got a whole new project over there. So it's a great move for him. I don't think he ever really settled at the Bulls and wasn't looking at his best, but it's a very interesting project happening over at Newcastle. So I think that'll be quite exciting for him. People, please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. We will have training coming up this afternoon. And if you are a member, you will also have some exclusive bits of training that will be members only. For now, it will be published for the public later. So if you would like to become a member, you will get access to that. Also, as we mentioned yesterday, we are giving away 2 tickets on Friday for Saturday. But it's for members only. So if you would like to go into that draw to win tickets, then please make sure you do go and become a member. And the entry is on the channel itself within the community tab. There's a little form there. You fill it out, and we're going to be doing a draw and sending 2 of our members to the game on Saturday. So please do consider becoming a member and getting yourself into that draw. People, thank you very much. Keep well, keep safe, and we'll see you guys throughout the rest of the week. Lots of content coming your way. We've got Sash Farming, Goma Zulu, as well as we're going to look here for today, and then tomorrow we'll have Jean-Luc Dupré from a press conference point of view, as well as obviously all the Australian content